You ever notice how easy it is to see a friend's bad habit? I mean, it's just glaringly obvious, right? But our own little quirks? Nope. They just fly completely under the radar. It's this superhuman paradox, and in this explainer, we're going to dig into why we all have these personal blind spots, and it all starts with one simple question.
We've all been there. We could probably write a 10-page report on someone else's mistake, complete with footnotes. But when it's our own screw-up, all those details suddenly get kind of fuzzy. To really get why this happens, we have to look at this powerful mental habit I like to call the magnifying glass effect.
You know what I mean. It's this tendency we have to put everything other people do under this intense, microscopic scrutiny. But when we look at our own actions, it's like we flip the binoculars around and look through the wrong end. We just zoom way in on them and zoom way out on ourselves.
You know, at its core, the simplest answer is often the most direct. When somebody else messes up, a little part of us just feels this relief. Like, phew, glad that wasn't me. It's this immediate, gut-level thing that puts a clear line between their actions and our own identity. But that feeling of relief, that's not just a coincidence.
It's actually tied to something much, much deeper. Something that's literally wired into our DNA, our survival instinct. I mean, this is the stuff that kept our ancestors alive, and, believe it or not, it still drives a whole lot of what we do today.
And this is where the ego really comes into play. It operates on this old-school survival of the fittest logic. So when we see someone else stumble, our ego can, interpret that as a boost for our own social standing. It's that classic king of the hill feeling. If they're down, well then, by comparison, we must be up. It doesn't mean we're bad people. It's just a powerful, primal drive.
And that instinct, it gets totally supercharged by this powerful force working inside our heads, cognitive bias. These are basically mental shortcuts our brain takes that, well, can lead to some pretty big errors in judgment. And one of the biggest culprits here is something called the fundamental attribution error.
And this right here, this is that bias in action. See, when they make a mistake, we chalk it up to their character. It's an obvious flaw, right? Something that needs to be corrected. But when we make the exact same mistake, oh, suddenly it's all about the situation. It was complicated. It was totally justified. It was just a one-time exception. We literally create two completely different sets of rules.
So why do we do this? Well, it's because we are the undisputed world experts on our own minds. We know every excuse, every justification, every possible way to wiggle out of taking the blame. And that's the double-edged sword. Our own intelligence lets us rationalize our behavior, but it can also be the very thing that stops us from seeing the truth and, actually growing from our mistakes.
Okay, so we've laid out the problem, right? It's our ego, our instincts, our biases. So, what's the fix? How do we get past this? Well, that brings us to a really powerful concept, the meaning of atonement.
To atone? It's pretty simple. It just means to make things right. And it's not just about saying, I'm sorry. It's about doing something good to show that you mean it. It's an action. It's all about moving past the mistake and actively working to repair the damage, both to other people and to our own character.
So how do we actually put that into practice? It all starts with consciously deciding to build a better moral compass. Let's just walk through these steps. First, you've got to recognize the bias we've been talking about. Then, you have to humbly acknowledge that, hey, we all have our own share of troubles. Nobody's perfect. And that leads to choosing to act fairly, which helps make the world a little more sane for everyone. And finally, when you do all this, you just naturally become a role model that other people can look up to.
You know, this entire process, it really just boils down to one fundamental action. It's about having the guts to stop pointing that magnifying glass at everybody else, and instead finally turn it inward. It's all about looking in the mirror.
And that's the real challenge, isn't it? When our own minds are so good at tricking us, when we're experts at wiggling out of our own thinking, how do we find what's actually real? How do we see ourselves clearly? And here's the answer, and it's so powerful because it's so simple. Think about it. We can argue with people. We can argue with ourselves. We can fight against guilt and self-reflection all day long. But a mirror? A mirror doesn't argue. It doesn't judge. It doesn't get emotional. It just shows you what's there. It reflects reality, unshaken and unfiltered.
So I'll just leave you with this final thought. Acknowledging our flaws is definitely not easy, and looking at our true reflection, yeah, that takes real courage. But the truth is always there, just waiting for us. So the only question left is this: what happens when we finally choose to look?